Okay, I want to get to our guest because, as I mentioned, 2 members of Congress are now out of a job this week after serious allegations involving their own staff members. Democrat Eric Swalwell of California is facing multiple accusations of sexual misconduct, including allegations from a former staffer who says he sexually assaulted her. In that particular claim, he denies that. Republican Tony Gonzalez of Texas admitted to an affair with a staff member. That is something that is strictly prohibited under House rules, and he was under investigation before he announced his resignation. So is this an accountability moment or just more proof that the system isn't working? And what can be done to push against something that has been going on for decades, Gee? And joining us now is Lauri Hennessey. She is president of the Washington chapter of the National Women's Political Caucus. And in full transparency, Lauri is the person who trained me here at KIRO when I first started working many, many moons ago. Good morning, Lauri.
Good morning, Ursula.
Thank you so much for joining us and for taking time out of your day. So I want to just get right to it because you worked on Capitol Hill with Bob Packwood, and there was this scandal involving him, and you lived this yourself. So when you see these cases now, does anything feel different, or are you thinking, why are we still here?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was on the Hill 30 years ago. I worked for Bob Packwood. I was his press secretary. I jokingly tell people now the worst job in the world is to be a press secretary when you're one of the people who were harassed by someone. It makes for a tough job. Nothing feels like it's changed. What Packwood was accused of was not only harassing people 30 years ago, but intimidating them, scaring them, trying to hunt them down, trying to destroy their reputations. And what we're reading with Swalwell is the same MO. It's you bring in these very young women who are impressionable. They look up to the member of Congress. They're so grateful for a moment in his presence. Then something happens, and then the member of Congress and their machinery, the staffers around them, destroy these women afterwards. And it feels like we've heard this song before, and yet here we are 30 years later. And Me Too happened, but apparently it needs to happen some more.
I want to talk about the woman part of it. Yeah. And look, I can give some numbers on the women, but why don't we see more women come out and with less support of people that are in office, and also why don't we see women sometimes help with the machine that attacks other women?
Yeah. That was the part for my own story. That was the part that hurt the most. It was more than the elected official ridiculousness. It was the staff that did as directed to destroy women. And most of the staff that did that were women. So that part's hard. There's something about this defending the king at all costs that we have in the halls of Congress. We do need to make not only the members of Congress, but the staffers who work for them must be accountable and have to speak up in protection of these women who are victimized. So yeah, that's the question. Why don't people speak up?
And as you mentioned, I mean, this was 30 years ago, and we're still seeing it today. Why does it still take public pressure or the threat of expulsion? And that was something that Congress was talking about if they hadn't resigned. And now we're hearing from more and more people who are saying, well, these rumors have been around. These rumors have been around. What is it going to take? What should the consequences be?
I mean, in my opinion, obviously I'm coming with the lens of the National Women Political Caucus. I think we need more women in Congress, first of all, because women have a different perspective they bring into these elected official roles, whether it's local, state, or federal. So first of all, vote for women. But beyond that, I think we definitely need to make people more accountable. And it's not just creating sexual harassment training. That's what we always do. We create a training. Well, obviously, Swalwell took that training, and he was still methodically doing this. And as Ursula said, it was the worst kept secret in Washington. Everyone knew. I will point out that this time, the thing that made a difference were the women all came together and created a social media machine, and women in Congress pushed for investigation. So the women all pushed to make something happen this time.
You know what? I'm glad you brought up voting. And let's talk about voting. White women in voting for Donald Trump, all three times, the majority of them voted for Donald Trump. 53% voted for him in 2024. Here's a man found civilly liable for sexual abuse. We all know about the Access Hollywood tape. And that, I mean, it's not like there's a hidden agenda with him. Everyone knows. So I guess what my question is what does that tell us right now about how gender gets weighed against other factors in the voting booth?
Yeah, such a great question. I teach at University of Washington, and my students often will ask, people of your generation, Professor, want us to vote. Show us why. Show us why it makes a difference. Because as far as we can see, your generation keeps voting this way.
Come on. Come on.
It's tough to answer that one because, we all had the facts. We all knew. People knew about Packwood. People have known about, there's too many people to name. Cuomo, there's plenty of people to name. So to go back to your question, I guess what I would say is most of the women I know who voted for Trump, and I don't think it's very many people, but those that I do know, they would view that vote differently if their daughter was involved. And I guess I always try to bring it back to the personal and get people to acknowledge the harm that is caused. And it matters when it's their daughter. So try to bring that story home as much as we can.
This is Lauri Hennessey, president of the Washington chapter of the National Women's Political Caucus, also a professor at the University of Washington. So let's go back to from your own experience as a staffer 30 years ago. How much of this comes down to power, and does Congress still give members too much control over their own workplaces?
Yeah, they seem to be better now. I mean, we have changed some rules and procedures. So, they take a sexual harassment training. But I've always felt that the way Congress was designed, and I hate to say this is from the beginning, was there was too much power. If you read the quotes from some of the people that Swalwell victimized, for example, there's this quote that just really stuck with me where one of his victims said, when he talked to you, it was like the sun was shining on you. You felt like the coolest person in the room. That's the way Congress now is, right? You're a young staffer, you're 22, 23. When I went to the Hill, I was 25. And everything is oriented around having a moment with that member of Congress, and you are then a success. So we need to change somehow the way that system is designed because they have too much power. And right now, the young women are the people who are getting hurt by that.
Okay, Laura, I'm just going to keep this really simple. First, let me just say this. I don't see this getting better at all. I'm going to ask you, do you see things getting better?
I hate to be a one-note guest on this delightful show, but they will get better if you vote in more women. That's my opinion, because right now the men maybe come in with the best of intentions, but oftentimes the power will go to their head. I haven't seen that happen as much with women.
Well, and let's speak to that because right now I was trying to look it up real quick. Women make up less than 30% of Congress.
Yeah.
And okay, I want you to expand on that more. And if we are in your class and you're telling us, well, we need to just bring in more women, what would that do?
It would be like, for example, when I was there, the ethics committee was the body that had power. When the ethics committee brought me in against my will to do an investigation into the senator I worked for, at one point they read in the diaries and they said, in your diaries, Senator Packwood wrote that you wear short skirts. We'd like you to stand up. And I had to stand up. And the ethics committee said, for the record, her skirt is professional today. Now, that was only 30 years ago that a young woman would have to stand up and show that her skirt was okay. I would argue if women were on that committee, when I was there, it was all men. I would argue that they might have brought a different voice to the table, and that would have led to a different action against Bob Packwood.
Wow. Lauri, there's some news. As a matter of fact, we haven't even gotten to it yet, and I don't know if you've heard about this. There's this site called motherless.com. And on this site, just recently, you guys can look it up when I'm done, on this site, it had 62 million visitors in February of 2026. And its core audience was the United States. It hosts over 20,000 videos of women filmed without their knowledge while unconscious, organized with tags like hashtag passed out, hashtag I check. So when 62 million people visit a site like this in a month, by the way, the site is still up. What does that tell us about the laws protecting women online and those who are responsible for closing that gap, my friend?
It tells us that we still have such a long way to go. Every time we start thinking that we've changed our culture and how, first of all, that breaks my heart. Mm-hmm. And you said, Gee, the sign is still up?
Yes, still up. Motherless.com. It had 62 million visitors in February of 2026, and the majority, its core audience, was United States of America.
Yeah. And now we have incel, we have a movement towards seeing the oppressed young man. That's not helping necessarily with this kind of us versus them way of seeing women as objects. What I would say, social media has arguably not helped the situation, perhaps not even arguably. We are at a pretty difficult point where Me Too was creating a space only a decade ago where people were starting to say, this has happened to me too, but it's faded back now in the social media climate we're now living in. So we need to rejuvenate it. We need to get young women to stand up, get engaged, fight for their rights, and everyone has to start pushing every young man in their life to not go to sites like that and to not be part of this world.
And Lauri, great points, first of all. Someone just texted in 206 because you're saying you didn't want to be one note and you're pushing for more women to be elected. And this 206 says more women like Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, and Tulsi Gabbard. No. And I know what you're saying is there are many qualified women who could do a great job, who could change the balance of power in Congress.
Yeah.
I just...
I'm sorry. And those women are always people who don't support getting women elected always point to those same names because it's easy to find the names of women that we're not impressed by. I would just challenge people to say, do you want a world in which 30% are women? When I was there, it was like 8%, so it's better, but it's still just 30%. And there are good women out there waiting to get trained and ready to get educated so they can run, and they don't have the tools available to them right now.
You listen to the voice of Lauri Hennessey, president of the National Women's Political Caucus, and also UW professor. I got about 30 seconds, and I want to ask, first of all, I just hear the positive strength in your voice. And I'm telling you right now, it's done something for my heart. So thank you for that. That's number one. Number two, can you take us back to the day that you decided I'm going to use my voice and my experience to help and make better for this world?
I love that. Quickly, one of my best friends, he used to work at KIRO a long time ago, and now he's at KOW. He and I were having coffee, and he said, you should get involved with Me Too. And I go, no one cares about my Me Too story. It was 30 years ago. He goes, no, they care. You need to get involved. And ever since then, I've been doing speaking. I do everything I can, and it makes me feel like I'm healing.
Lauri Hennessey, first of all, my friend, the person who trained me here at KIRO, first person. Thank you so much. I'm incredibly proud of you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you
guys.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Wow.